50 Cent just called Rick Ross broke, and as you can imagine, Ross wasn't about to let that slide. What started as a jab about money quickly turned into another heated chapter in one of hip-hop's longest-running rivalries. Now both sides are firing back. Rick Ross reignited his years-long feud with 50 Cent during a recent appearance on Patrick Bet-David's podcast. When asked whether he and 50 had ever patched things up, Ross made his position crystal clear. "We have never been cool." That answer set the tone immediately. No jokes, no attempts at peace, just a direct reminder that the tension between them never disappeared. As the conversation continued, Bet-David pointed to 50 Cent's business success and reported wealth, arguing that he had built an impressive empire worth hundreds of millions. Ross wasn't convinced. Then came the comment that instantly spread across the internet. "I'll let 50 wash the bottom of my yacht." Ross doubled down on the joke, saying 50 could put on goggles, grab the cleaning gear, and get to work. But he didn't stop there. He also claimed that 50 doesn't own key parts of the music and television empire people often credit him for. According to Ross, 50 doesn't own power, doesn't own major portions of his catalog, and doesn't benefit the way people assume from projects like Get Rich or Die Trying. His argument wasn't just an insult. It was a challenge to the entire perception of 50's success. Ross suggested that much of what people believe about 50's wealth is based on outdated information from before his bankruptcy filing. He even claimed that 50 lives in a modest two-bedroom apartment, a statement that immediately fueled debate online. The internet reacted before 50 even had a chance to respond. Some fans called Ross' comments ridiculous, pointing to 50's successful tours and television ventures. Others argued that 50 continues to make significant money through the Power franchise and other business interests. DJ Academics amplified the moment even further, turning what began as a podcast clip into a major topic across hip-hop media. Then 50 saw it. Before getting into his response, it helps to understand how this feud reached this point. The rivalry dates back to the 2008 BET Hip Hop Awards. Ross has long claimed that 50 gave him a disrespectful look during the event. 50, on the other hand, has repeatedly said he doesn't even remember the interaction. Whether it was a deliberate slight or simply a misunderstanding, that moment became the foundation of a feud that has lasted for years. Things escalated in 2009 when Ross released Mafia Music, a track that included shots at 50 and references to the mother of his child. That move guaranteed a response. 50 answered with Officer Ricky, one of the most memorable diss records of the era. Rather than focusing solely on music, he dug into Ross' past and exposed the fact that Ross had once worked as a correctional officer in Florida. The revelation struck a nerve because it challenged the image Ross had spent years building. The issue wasn't simply about lyrics anymore. It was about credibility and identity. From that point forward, the conflict expanded far beyond music. Diss tracks became interviews. Interviews became social media exchanges. Social media exchanges eventually became lawsuits. Unlike many rap feuds that fade after a few months, this one kept growing because neither side was willing to let the other gain the upper hand. Part of the reason the rivalry remains relevant is that both men evolved beyond music. 50 built successful businesses in television, entertainment, and consumer products. Ross developed a luxury-focused brand centered around wealth, real estate, cars, and lifestyle. As a result, whenever money enters the conversation, it hits at the heart of both of their public identities. The legal battles only added more fuel. In 2015, after being ordered to pay millions in damages related to the release of a sex tape involving Lastonia Leviston, the mother of one of Rick Ross' children, 50 filed for bankruptcy protection. Ross has repeatedly referenced that chapter whenever questions about wealth arise. Ross brought it up again during his recent interview, arguing that people ignore key details when discussing 50's finances. The feud also produced litigation going the other way. 50 sued Ross over the use of "In the Club" on a mixtape, leading to another lengthy legal dispute. According to Ross, reviewing financial documents during discovery left him surprised by what he saw. Years later, he would use that experience as part of the argument he presented on the podcast. Meanwhile, 50 became famous for posting images of large amounts of cash online, even during bankruptcy proceedings. Those posts attracted attention from both fans and the court system, further blurring the line between image and reality. Today, celebrity wealth estimates place 50 Cent at roughly $100 million and Rick Ross at around $180 million. Whether those figures are accurate is another debate entirely, but they remain central to the public argument between the two men. 50 eventually responded. During an appearance on $1 Million Worth of Game, he suggested that Ross' luxurious lifestyle is more presentation than reality. That single word, presentation, was aimed directly at Ross' brand. According to 50, the estate, the cars, and the image are not necessarily proof of financial strength. He specifically targeted Ross' massive Georgia property, known as the Promised Land, arguing that maintaining such an estate is expensive and difficult. The comments were designed to attack the very symbol Ross uses to represent his success. Ross later responded by offering 50 the opportunity to film television productions at his property, effectively continuing the same exchange from the opposite direction. At that point, both men were publicly suggesting that the other needed work. Then the feud moved into more personal territory. Ross referenced 50's son, Sire, and suggested the child might benefit from emotional support amid ongoing family tensions. Many fans felt that involving children crossed a line and pushed the rivalry beyond entertainment. The situation became even more chaotic when Benzino joined the conversation and began taking shots at 50 as well. Ross also questioned 50's loyalty to Dr. Dre after 50 was seen spending time with Drake during Drake's conflict with Kendrick Lamar. Ross argued that siding with Drake seemed inconsistent with the loyalty 50 had often expressed toward Dre. It was another strategic attack, not on money this time, but on credibility. 50, meanwhile, continued mocking Ross whenever opportunities appeared. After an altercation involving Ross at a music festival in Vancouver, 50 referenced the incident during a concert appearance and turned it into part of his ongoing campaign of public trolling. By this stage, the feud had accumulated so many chapters that keeping score had become nearly impossible. But beneath the insults, jokes, and social media posts, both men continue making the same basic argument. Who really owns their success? Ross insists that 50 lacks ownership of some of the projects most closely associated with his legacy, including Get Rich or Die Tryin' and the Power franchise. In today's entertainment landscape, ownership matters more than ever. Conversations about masters, intellectual property, and long-term control have become central to discussions about wealth. Ross has repeatedly used that reality to challenge 50's image as a business powerhouse. 50 counters by arguing that Ross is selling a lifestyle that may be difficult to sustain over the long term. That disagreement sits at the center of everything. Fans remain divided. Some point to 50's television empire and business accomplishments. Others point to Ross' real estate holdings, brand partnerships, and luxury-driven business model. The truth is that much of the debate exists in the space between public perception and private contracts. Ross believes he delivered 50 his greatest defeat. 50 clearly disagrees. What's undeniable is that this feud has lasted longer than almost anyone expected. For more than a decade, these two have traded insults, lawsuits, diss tracks, interviews, and social media attacks. Yet neither appears interested in ending it. Maybe that's because the argument isn't really about money anymore. Ross lives in one of the most recognizable estates in hip-hop and continues building his brand. 50 produces successful television projects, sells out shows, and remains one of the most influential personalities in entertainment. At that level, the question of who is richer becomes less important than what the rivalry represents. What began with a look at an awards show eventually became a years-long battle over respect, image, ownership, and legacy. The yacht jokes, the bankruptcy references, the mansion criticism, and the constant trolling are all different chapters in the same story. And perhaps the most revealing part of the entire feud is that, despite everything that has happened, there seems to be a reluctant respect underneath it all. Both men built themselves into major figures in hip-hop. Both survived setbacks. Both continued moving forward. That may be the one thing they have in common. The feud continues, and if history is any indication, the next chapter is probably already on the way. Two of hip-hop's wealthiest men just spent a podcast appearance arguing about who's actually broke. It sounds like a joke until you realize they meant every word of it. This rivalry didn't start with money. It started with a look. Back in 2008, at the BET Hip Hop Awards, Rick Ross crossed paths with 50 Cent, and according to Ross, The way 50 carried himself that night felt like disrespect. No words were exchanged, no public confrontation, just a moment that Ross has stuck with him. 50, for his part, has claimed he doesn't even remember the interaction. That gap between the two stories says a lot about how this entire feud would play out for the next 15 years. One side feels wronged. The other side shrugs it off. Neither one backs down. The silence didn't last. In 2009, Ross dropped Mafia music, and it wasn't a vague subliminal shot. He went after 50 directly, and he brought up the mother of 50's child in the process. In rap beef, there are lines you can cross and lines you generally don't, and bringing a man's family into a record tends to guarantee a response. 50 delivered one almost immediately. Officer Ricky wasn't just a diss track, it was an exposure. 50 dug into Ross's life before the rap career and surfaced something Ross had spent years keeping out of the spotlight. That William Leonard Roberts II had worked as a corrections officer in Florida before he ever became Rick Ross, the cocaine kingpin of his own lyrics. That detail mattered because Ross's entire image was built on the opposite story. The fictional boss persona ran straight into a very real resume, and 50 made sure everyone saw the contradiction. From there, the war moved off wax and into the courtroom, and that's really where things got complicated. In 2015, a jury sided with Lastonia Leviston, the mother of Ross's child, in a lawsuit against 50 over the unauthorized release of a private video involving her. The judgment came in at $5 million, and it landed at a brutal time for 50 financially. That same year, he filed for bankruptcy, telling the court he didn't have the capital to cover roughly $30 million in outstanding debt. Ross never let that detail fade from the conversation. To him, it became proof that the empire 50 talked about in interviews didn't match what was actually happening behind the scenes. 50 wasn't done either. That same year, he turned around and sued Ross for $2 million, accusing him of using 50's song into club without permission on a mixtape. The lawsuit went through discovery, and during that process, Ross's legal team got access to 50's financial records. Years later, Ross has said that what he saw in those documents surprised him, that 50's financial situation at the time looked far less stable than the public image suggested. He's held on to that information ever since, and it's become one of his sharpest talking points whenever the subject of 50's wealth comes up. Which brings things to now. In a recent appearance on the PBD podcast, host Patrick Bet-David asked Ross directly whether he and 50 had ever patched things up. Ross didn't soften the answer. He said flatly that they had never been cool, not for one day. Then the conversation turned to money, and Bet-David pushed back, pointing to reports that put 50's net worth somewhere around $100 million. Ross wasn't having it. He joked that he'd let 50 scrub the bottom of his yacht for a paycheck, since apparently 50 needed the work. Underneath the joke was a real argument. Ross claims 50 doesn't actually own significant pieces of his own catalog or his television empire. He pointed specifically at Get Rich or Die Tryin', one of the best-selling rap albums ever made, and at Power, the franchise that's generated hundreds of millions in revenue across multiple spin-offs. According to Ross, 50 doesn't hold real ownership in either one, which is why, in his telling, 50 rarely promotes the album that made him famous. Ross went a step further, claiming 50 currently lives in a modest two-bedroom apartment, a claim that stands in sharp contrast to the mansions and luxury lifestyle 50 has rapped about for 2 decades. 50 didn't wait long to answer. On the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast, he dismissed Ross's entire lifestyle as exactly that, a performance, dressed up to look like permanent wealth. He took specific aim at Ross's Georgia estate, the property Ross calls the Promised Land, suggesting the upkeep costs more than Ross can actually sustain. He painted a picture of Ross eventually holding on as little more than a squatter in his own mansion. It was a calculated insult, because that estate isn't just a house to Ross. It's the backdrop for his car shows, his lifestyle content, his entire public identity. Attacking the property was never really about real estate. It was about credibility. From there, the feud kept finding new directions. Ross brought up 50's relationship with Dr. Dre, questioning his loyalty after 50 was seen socializing with Drake during Drake's public conflict with Kendrick Lamar, then noted how quiet 50 got once that conflict didn't go Drake's way. 50, meanwhile, brought up an altercation Ross was involved in at a concert in Vancouver in the summer of 2024, where Ross reportedly got into it with members of the crowd after closing his set with Kendrick's Not Like Us. When 50 performed in Canada not long after, he referenced the incident from the stage, turning Ross's bad night into part of his own show. Things got uncomfortable when Ross shifted from financial jabs toward Ross's son, Sire, suggesting through social media that the child might be struggling emotionally because of ongoing family tension, and framing an offer to buy the boy a dog as some kind of help. That moment didn't land the way earlier shots had. Even people who'd been enjoying the back and forth as entertainment started saying the same thing. Leave the kids out of it. So where does that leave things? By most public estimates, Ross sits somewhere around $175 to $180 million, while 50 is generally listed closer to $100 million, though anyone who follows either of these men knows those numbers are guesses at best, built on outdated reports that rarely account for debt, deals, or actual ownership stakes. Which is exactly why this fight never really resolves. Ross says 50 doesn't own his masters or his biggest show. 50 says Ross is renting an image he can't afford to keep. Neither side has produced a contract to settle it once and for all, and at this point, it's worth wondering if either of them actually wants to. What's clear is that this isn't really about who has more money. It's about two men who both clawed their way from nothing to the top of an industry, and neither one is willing to let the other write the final version of that story. 15 years in, the beef hasn't cooled, and given the history here, it probably won't anytime soon. If you've been following this one for years, let us know in the comments who you think actually came out on top, and subscribe if you want to catch the next chapter when it inevitably drops.